Millions of eyes watched the live stream as Bradley wrapped his arm around a blonde woman, boldly declaring her the love of his life to his adoring followers. The champagne flowed, the luxury yacht rocked gently in the Miami harbor, and the chat exploded with heart emojis. He felt invincible, the king of his self-made world. But his smug grin froze when the camera panned slightly to the right. Standing on the VIP deck, illuminated by the neon lights, was his 6-month pregnant wife. And behind her, flanked by a dozen stone-faced security guards, was the billionaire family he never knew she had. Simone Sterling was a master of the quiet life. To the outside world, and to her husband, Bradley Jenkins, she was simply Simone Hayes, a mid-level gallery curator living in Chicago. She wore vintage clothes, drove a sensible 5-year-old Honda, and meticulously budgeted for groceries. Bradley, a handsome, blue-eyed guy from Ohio, with a head full of startup dreams and an infectious, albeit desperate ambition, had no idea that his beautiful black wife was the sole daughter of Reginald Sterling. Reginald Sterling wasn't just wealthy, he was a titan. Sterling Enterprises owned a staggering percentage of commercial real estate across the Midwest and the East Coast. The Sterling family operated with the kind of generational wealth that didn't require flashy logos or loud declarations. They moved in silence, dealing in billions, heavily guarded by NDAs, private security, and fiercely loyal legal teams. Simone had chosen to use her mother's maiden name professionally and personally in her 20s. She wanted to know that her achievements, her friendships, and her romances were earned, not bought. When she met Bradley at a local coffee shop 5 years ago, she fell for his charm. He was a white, ambitious tech enthusiast who practically vibrated with the desire to make something of himself. He didn't look at her like she was a walking bank account. He looked at her with genuine affection, entirely convinced she was a hard-working girl from the suburbs trying to make ends meet. Simone loved that about him. She loved the normalcy of sharing a cramped apartment, of splitting bills, of celebrating a modest raise with a cheap bottle of wine. They married in an intimate, rustic ceremony. Simone's family attended, of course, but Reginald and her older brother Dominic played the part of a successful but entirely ordinary upper-middle-class family. Reginald had his doubts about Bradley. "The boy talks more than he works," her father had grumbled in private, but he loved his daughter enough to respect her wishes. However, 3 years into the marriage, the cracks in Bradley's facade began to show. His tech startup, an app designed to connect freelance creatives, failed to secure Series A funding. Instead of pivoting or getting a steady job, Bradley fell down the rabbit hole of social media hustle culture. He rebranded himself as Brad Jenkins, an entrepreneur, lifestyle coach, and influencer. The shift in his personality was gradual, then sudden. He became obsessed with optics. He insisted they lease a luxury apartment downtown that they couldn't afford on his non-existent salary and her curator wages. He began renting exotic cars for a few hours just to take photos with them for his Instagram grid. He spent hours on TikTok and Instagram Live preaching about the grind to an audience of gullible teenagers and aspiring entrepreneurs. Simone watched with growing unease as her husband transformed into a caricature of success. He was constantly glued to his screen, measuring his self-worth in likes, shares, and subscriber counts. Their evening conversations dwindled to Bradley complaining about the algorithm or boasting about a new brand deal that paid entirely in free energy drinks. Then, the miracle happened. After months of quiet struggling, Simone found out she was pregnant. She remembered sitting on the edge of their leased marble bathtub, staring at the 2 pink lines on the plastic stick. A wave of overwhelming joy washed over her, followed immediately by a profound sense of clarity. It was time to tell Bradley the truth. It was time to introduce him to the Sterling Empire. She reasoned that his obsession with fake wealth stemmed from financial anxiety and a deep-seated insecurity about providing for a family. If she revealed that they never had to worry about money again, that their child's future, and his, was secured by a multi-billion-dollar trust fund, he would finally relax. He could drop the exhausting influencer persona and just be the man she fell in love with. She planned a special dinner to break the news. She cooked his favorite meal, lit candles, and placed the positive pregnancy test in a small gift box. When Bradley walked through the door that evening, he didn't even notice the candles. He was staring at his phone, his thumb swiping furiously. "Brad," she said softly, "can you put the phone down? I have something really important to tell you." "Hold on, Simmy," he muttered, not looking up. "I'm in the middle of a live AMA. The engagement is through the roof right now." He walked right past the dinner table, walked into his home office, and locked the door. Simone sat alone at the table, the food growing cold, her hand resting on her flat stomach. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The man in that room didn't just want financial security. He wanted the fame. He wanted the adoration of strangers. And she, a quiet curator who hated the spotlight, was slowly becoming an accessory he didn't know what to do with. She decided to wait to tell him about the money. She would tell him about the baby, but the sterling secret would remain locked away until she was sure of who her husband had truly become. By the time Simone was 4 months pregnant, the distance between them had become a chasm. Bradley's reaction to the pregnancy had been underwhelming. He had smiled, kissed her forehead, and immediately calculated how a family man arc would play to his demographics. He even tried to convince her to let him vlog her first ultrasound, a request she shut down with icy finality. His networking trips became more frequent. First, it was weekend conferences in Austin. Then, mastermind retreats in Las Vegas. By her 5th month, he was practically commuting to Miami. "It's where the money is, Simone," he argued one evening as he packed a sleek, unnecessarily expensive designer duffel bag. "I'm closing deals. I'm building a brand. I'm doing this for us, for the baby." But Simone wasn't stupid. She noticed the subtle shifts, the way he placed his phone face down on the counter, the new password on his laptop, the sudden intense focus on his physical appearance, complete with a new wardrobe of unbuttoned silk shirts and an expensive cologne that smelled nothing like the man she married. And then there was Chloe. Chloe Dempsey was a 23-year-old fitness and lifestyle influencer based in Miami. She had 1 million followers, long blonde hair extensions, a manufactured laugh, and an endless stream of bikini photos. Simone first noticed her lingering in the background of Bradley's Instagram stories. At first, she was just a face in a crowded VIP booth. Then, she was sitting next to him on a rented yacht. Soon, she was tagging him in her own posts with captions like, "Building empires with the best." When Simone confronted him, Bradley pulled out the textbook gaslighting routine. "Are you serious right now?" he had scoffed, looking at her as if she were insane. "Chloe is a business partner. She's helping me tap into the Gen Z demographic. You're being incredibly insecure, Simone." "Honestly, it's probably just the pregnancy hormones making you paranoid. I'm out here breaking my back to provide for this family. And you're accusing me of what? Cheating." He made her feel guilty for even asking. For a few weeks, Simone tried to bury her suspicions. She focused on the baby, setting up the nursery in their apartment, painting the walls a soft sage green by herself, while Bradley was supposedly in back-to-back meetings in Florida. But someone else was watching. Dominic Sterling, Simone's older brother, possessed all the ruthless business acumen of their father, but with a protective, almost predatory instinct when it came to his little sister. Dominic had never bought Bradley's act. As the head of acquisitions for Sterling Enterprises, Dominic read people for a living, and Bradley read like a cheap, self-published paperback. During a rare weekend when Bradley was actually home, Dominic dropped by the apartment unannounced. He found his sister looking exhausted, her swollen belly prominent beneath a loose sweater, struggling to assemble a crib while Bradley was in his office, yelling enthusiastically at a ring light. Dominic didn't say much during that visit. He hugged his sister, made her tea, and quietly finished assembling the crib. But on his way out, his dark eyes locked onto Bradley's office door with a chilling intensity. Without telling Simone, knowing the stress could harm the baby, Dominic made a phone call. He employed the services of Vance Security Group, a high-end private investigation firm entirely populated by ex-intelligence officers. Their mandate was simple: track Bradley Jenkins' every move the moment he stepped foot outside of Chicago. The results came back 2 weeks later. Dominic sat in his mahogany-paneled office at the top of the Sterling Tower, flipping through the thick dossier. The photographs were damning. High-resolution images of Bradley and Chloe Dempsey. Bradley holding her hand at high-end restaurants. Bradley kissing her on the balcony of a luxury condo. Bradley buying her a diamond tennis bracelet at a boutique in the design district. The financial reports were even worse. Bradley was drowning in debt. He had maxed out every credit card in his name and had taken out predatory high-interest loans to fund his fake millionaire lifestyle and keep his mistress draped in designer gear. He was a house of cards, waiting to collapse. Dominic took the file straight to Reginald. The patriarch of the Sterling family sat behind his desk, studying the photographs. His expression remained entirely neutral, which Dominic knew meant his father was experiencing a level of rage that could level a city block. He leaves Simone alone to build a nursery while he plays a rich man with a blonde bimbo on borrowed money, Reginald said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He closed the folder. Bring your sister to the estate. Tonight. When Simone arrived at the sprawling Sterling compound in the Chicago suburbs, she thought it was just a routine family dinner. But when she walked into her father's private study and saw Dominic standing silently by the fireplace and her father holding a manila folder, her stomach plummeted. They sat her down. They didn't patronize her. They laid out the photographs, the bank statements, the entire fabricated double life of Bradley Jenkins. Simone stared at the images of her husband's hands, the hands that had touched her pregnant belly just days ago, wrapped around another woman. She looked at the receipts for thousands of dollars spent on a mistress while she was clipping coupons to save for baby clothes. She didn't cry. The betrayal was too deep, too absolute for tears. The love she had for Bradley evaporated in that room, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. The man she loved was a fiction. The man who remained was a parasite. I will have my lawyers draft the divorce papers immediately, Reginald said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. We will crush him financially. He will never see a dime of this family's money, and he will never come near you or my grandchild again. Simone looked at the photo of Bradley and Chloe laughing on a yacht. She thought about his arrogance, his gaslighting, and his desperate need for an audience. No, Simone said, her voice eerily calm. Dominic and Reginald looked at her in surprise. If we just divorce him, he'll spin the narrative, Simone said, looking up at her father. He'll go on his live streams and play the victim. He'll tell his followers that his insecure wife left him because she couldn't handle his hustle. He'll use my pain for content. She stood up, her posture straightening. the quiet curator vanishing as the billionaire's daughter finally stepped into the light. "He loves his audience more than he loves me," Simone said, a fierce, dark smile touching the corners of her mouth. "He wants the world to watch him. So let's give them a show." The Sterling family did not get mad. They got strategic. For the next 4 weeks, Simone Sterling didn't shed a single tear over Bradley Jenkins, the weeping, vulnerable woman who had excitedly painted a nursery in a cramped Chicago apartment was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating architect of ruin. She moved back into the Sterling family estate, a sprawling stone mansion fortified by high-tech security and iron gates, and began to work alongside her father and brother. Dominic, acting as her primary general, assembled a war room in the estate's west wing. They didn't just want to expose Bradley, they wanted to dismantle the very foundation of his fragile, ego-driven universe. "He craves validation and wealth," Dominic said one evening, pacing before a massive digital whiteboard covered in flowcharts of Bradley's meager finances and social media analytics. "If we just serve him divorce papers, he'll hire a cheap lawyer, drag this out in the press, and play the victim. We need him to voluntarily step into a snare, one so public he can never walk it back." Simone, sitting in a plush leather armchair, her hand resting protectively over her 6-month pregnant belly, nodded slowly. "He wants to be a titan. So let's give him a crown before we cut off his head." The trap was elegantly simple, yet devastatingly thorough. Reginald Sterling utilized one of his many holding companies to spin up a dummy corporation named Apex Innovations. On paper, Apex was a wildly well-funded, cutting-edge tech incubator looking to aggressively market its new lifestyle brand. To do so, they needed an ambassador, a fresh, dynamic influencer who understood the modern hustle. Through a network of shell emails and highly paid fixers, Apex Innovations reached out to Bradley. When the email hit Bradley's inbox, he was sitting in his leased Chicago apartment, nervously calculating the interest on a $50,000 personal loan he had taken out to buy Chloe a Cartier watch. The Apex offer was staggering. They wanted him for a 2-year exclusive contract worth $2.5 million, with an immediate $250,000 signing bonus. The catch? The contract had to be signed live during a massive, heavily promoted live stream event hosted on an Apex-chartered mega yacht in Miami. Bradley didn't even bother to have a lawyer look at the contract. His ego, starved for genuine validation, blinded him completely. He had finally manifested his destiny. He was a millionaire. That night, he called Simone. She was sitting in the Sterling war room, flanked by 2 of her father's top corporate attorneys, when her phone buzzed with his name. Dominic gave her a nod, and she answered, her voice softening into the perfect imitation of the naive, supportive wife. "Hey, Brad," she said softly. "Are you coming home tonight?" "Simmy, babe, you won't believe it." Bradley's voice was breathless, practically vibrating with adrenaline. "I did it. I finally secured the bag. A massive tech incubator wants me as the face of their brand. Multi-million-dollar deal." "Oh, Bradley, that's incredible," Simone said, staring blankly at the attorneys who were silently taking notes. "So, does this mean you can be here for the 24-week ultrasound next week?" There was a heavy pause on the line. "Ah, babe, about that. The signing event is next week, in Miami. It's going to be a massive production, a huge live stream. I need to be down there, setting up, networking, getting the vibe right. I can't miss this. You understand, right? I'm doing this for our family." Simone closed her eyes. Even knowing what she knew, the lie stung. He was choosing a party and a mistress over his unborn child. "I understand," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Have a good trip, Bradley." Love you, babe. I'll wire you some cash when the bonus clears. He hung up. Simone dropped the phone onto the mahogany table. The room was dead silent. She looked up at her father, whose jaw was clenched so tightly a muscle ticked in his cheek. Let him have his party, Simone said, her voice like ice. Make sure the yacht is fully rigged with 4K cameras. I want every single one of his followers to see exactly what kind of man he is. The Sterling machine moved into overdrive. A fixer named Harrison Cole, a suave, ruthlessly efficient man who usually negotiated international real estate acquisitions for Reginald, was dispatched to Miami to play the role of the Apex Innovations executive. Harrison's job was to inflate Bradley's ego to the bursting point, ensuring the influencer felt completely invincible on the night of the live stream. Meanwhile, Chloe Dempsey, the mistress, was eating up the new narrative. Bradley had convinced her that he was leaving his nagging, unsupportive wife in Chicago, and that this new millions-dollar deal was the beginning of their new life together. He promised her she would be right by his side on the yacht, co-hosting the live stream, cementing them as the new power couple of the influencer world. They had no idea they were dancing on a stage built by the very family they were betraying. Miami Harbor was practically glowing under the twilight sky. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of expensive perfume and salt water. Docked at the prime VIP slip was the Sovereign, a 150-foot tri-deck luxury yacht rented by the Sterling family through their dummy corporation. It was a monument to excess. Neon blue lights pulsed just beneath the waterline. A DJ was setting up equipment on the top deck, and uniformed staff carried trays of crystal champagne. Bradley Jenkins stood on the master deck, wearing a custom-tailored white linen suit that he had charged to a credit card he could no longer afford to pay off. He leaned over the polished teak railing, looking out at the city skyline, feeling like a god. Nervous? Bradley turned to see Harrison Cole walking toward him. The Apex executive looked immaculate in a dark navy suit, holding a clipboard and an earpiece. Nervous? Never. Bradley flashed a high-wattage, practiced smile. I was born for this, Harrison. The audience is going to eat this up. We've been teasing a massive life update on all my socials for 3 days. The hype is unreal. Excellent, Harrison said, his smile perfectly polite, giving absolutely nothing away. The primary cameras are set up in the grand salon. We go live in exactly 45 minutes. My team wants maximum authenticity, Bradley. We want your followers to see the real you, your real life, your actual motivations. Don't hold back. Introduce the people who matter to you. Say no more, Bradley winked. I've got the perfect soft launch planned. Harrison nodded and walked away, tapping his earpiece. Target is primed, he murmured into the hidden mic. ETA on the package. 10 minutes, Dominic Sterling's voice crackled back through the earpiece. Hold the live stream start until we are in position. Inside the yacht's plush VIP cabin, Chloe was applying a final coat of lip gloss. She wore a skin-tight, emerald green silk dress that left very little to the imagination. Bradley walked in, his eyes hungrily scanning her reflection in the mirror. You ready to be a millionaire's girl? He asked, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind and kissing her neck. Chloe giggled, tilting her head back. I thought you'd never ask, baby. Is the wife officially out of the picture? Simone is old news, Bradley scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. She doesn't get the grind. She wants to sit in a boring apartment and clip coupons. I need someone who matches my energy. Once this contract is signed tonight, I'm cutting her a check, filing the papers, and we are moving to South Beach full-time. What about the baby? Chloe asked, though she didn't sound particularly concerned. I'll pay child support. It's whatever, Bradley said callously, checking his hair in the mirror. "My lawyers will handle it. Tonight is about us. When the live viewer count hits 50,000, I want you to walk out. I'm going to introduce you to the world." 15 minutes later, the countdown clock on Bradley's Twitch and Instagram channels hit 0. The chat was already scrolling by, so fast it was a blur of text and emojis. "What's up, fam? Welcome to the next chapter." Bradley roared into the professional-grade microphone, standing in the center of the yacht's grand salon. Behind him, the glass doors were thrown open, revealing the Miami skyline and the glittering water. "I told you big things were coming. I told you that if you keep grinding, keep hustling, the universe pays out." The viewer count skyrocketed. 10,000, 25,000, 40,000. Harrison stood off-camera, watching the monitors with a detached, clinical interest. He checked his phone. A single text from Dominic. "We are at the dock. Tonight, I am officially partnering with Apex Innovations on a multi-million-dollar venture," Bradley shouted, holding up a prop champagne glass. The chat exploded. Fire emojis rained down the screen. "But I didn't get here alone. You guys know I preach about keeping your circle tight, about surrounding yourself with people who elevate you." He turned toward the corridor. "And nobody elevates me like this woman right here. The muse, the partner in crime, come here, baby." On cue, Chloe strutted into the camera frame. The chat paused for a split second in confusion. Bradley's hardcore followers knew he was married, though he rarely posted Simone, before a wave of questions flooded in. Bradley didn't care. He was intoxicated by the attention. He threw his arm around Chloe's bare shoulders, pulling her flush against his side. She leaned into him, flashing a brilliant, manufactured smile at the lens. "This is Chloe, guys. The real deal," Bradley said, his voice dropping into a pseudo-intimate register. When the old life doesn't fit anymore, you have to upgrade. You have to find the people who match your wavelength. And let me tell you, we are just getting started. He leaned in and kissed her, long and deep, right on the live stream. The viewer count hit 75,000. It was the peak of his career, the absolute pinnacle of his manufactured existence. He pulled back, a smug, invincible grin plastered across his face. He looked past the camera, expecting to see Harrison giving him a thumbs up. Instead, Harrison was stepping aside. The heavy mahogany doors at the back of the grand salon, leading from the private boarding ramp, were swinging open. The heavy, rhythmic thud of combat boots on teak wood echoed over the music. 12 men wearing dark, tailored suits and earpieces filed into the room, their expressions carved from stone. They fanned out, creating a perimeter, blocking the exits, and completely ignoring the camera crew. The Vance security detail had arrived. Bradley's smile faltered. His hand dropped from Chloe's shoulder. "Hey, Harrison, what is this? Is this part of the bit?" Harrison didn't answer. He simply gestured toward the open doorway. Stepping through the threshold, flanked by her father and her brother, was Simone. She did not look like the meek, coupon-clipping girl from the suburbs. She was draped in a breathtaking, custom-tailored white maternity gown that cascaded around her like liquid marble. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant style, and around her neck rested a vintage diamond collar that cost more than the yacht they were standing on. She looked regal. She looked untouchable. And she looked right down the barrel of the camera lens before her cold, unyielding gaze locked onto her husband. Bradley felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him pale and clammy. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the massive security detail. He looked at Reginald Sterling, a man he knew as a retired accountant, now radiating the terrifying aura of an emperor. And finally, he looked back at his pregnant wife. The chat on the monitor beside him had stopped moving entirely. "Hello, Bradley," Simone said, her voice smooth, calm, and amplified perfectly by the room's acoustics. The entire live stream of 80,000 people hung on her every word. "I see you've already started the celebration." Silence fell over the grand salon of the yacht, a silence so profound that the gentle lapping of the Miami harbor, waves against the hull, sounded like thunder. The pulsing club music had been abruptly cut by the DJ, who was now staring wide-eyed at the phalanx of men in tailored suits blocking the exits. 80,000 people were watching through the high-definition lenses, the chat scrolling at a dizzying, unreadable speed. Bradley's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. His carefully manicured persona, the loud, untouchable, self-made hustle bro, shattered into a million jagged pieces. He instinctively took a step back, bumping into Chloe, who let out an indignant squeak. "Simone," Bradley stammered, his voice cracking, completely devoid of its usual booming confidence. "What are you doing here? How did you—" "I asked you a question, Bradley," Simone interrupted, her voice an icy stiletto that pinned him to the floor. She glided forward, the train of her custom maternity gown whispering against the polished teak. Her brother, Dominic, stepped to her right, his dark eyes fixed on Bradley with the predatory stillness of a shark. Her father, Reginald, stood to her left, radiating the kind of absolute, terrifying power that billions of dollars and decades of ruthless corporate warfare afford a man. "Is this the massive life update you were teasing?" Simone gestured gracefully toward Chloe, who was suddenly looking very small and incredibly confused in her emerald silk dress. "Is this the upgrade you were telling your followers about?" Bradley panicked. His eyes darted frantically toward the camera crew. "Cut the feed!" he shrieked, his voice reaching a hysterical pitch. "Harrison, turn the damn cameras off right now!" Harrison Cole, standing comfortably near the monitors, adjusted his pristine cuffs and smiled a devastatingly polite smile. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Bradley. As the executive director of Apex Innovations, I must insist we maintain our commitment to authenticity. The viewers deserve to see the real you." "Apex?" Bradley's eyes widened in horror as the realization began to sink its claws into him. He looked from Harrison to Dominic to Reginald and finally to his wife. "There is no Apex Innovations, Bradley." Reginald Sterling spoke for the first time. His voice was a low, rumbling baritone that commanded absolute obedience. "It is a shell corporation, one of dozens managed by my family's holding company, Sterling Enterprises. We created it 4 weeks ago for the sole purpose of bringing you to this exact spot, in front of your precious audience." Chloe gasped loudly. Even with her limited knowledge of corporate America, everyone in the luxury lifestyle space knew the name Sterling Enterprises. They owned half the commercial real estate in Chicago and major stakes in luxury conglomerates worldwide. She looked at Simone's vintage diamond collar and then at Bradley's rented linen suit, the puzzle pieces rapidly snapping into place. "Sterling?" Chloe whispered, stepping away from Bradley as if he were radioactive. "Brad, what is he talking about? You said she was a broke gallery worker." "She is!" Bradley yelled, desperately trying to salvage the unsalvageable. "She's lying. They're all lying. This is a deep fake or a prank. Chat, don't believe this." Dominic chuckled, a dark, humorless sound. He reached inside his suit jacket and pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder. He casually tossed it onto the glass coffee table, sitting between them. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. "Those are the financial realities of Bradley Jenkins," Dominic announced, making sure his voice carried perfectly to the boom mics. "For the benefit of the 80,000 people currently watching, let's do a quick audit of the grind. Bradley currently possesses 0 assets. He holds $85,000 in high-interest credit card debt, primarily accumulated through renting luxury cars by the hour and purchasing designer handbags for his mistress. He recently took out a predatory $50,000 personal loan to buy a Cartier watch to maintain his illusion of wealth. The chat on the monitor beside Bradley was practically exploding. Broke boy exposed. Rent-a-millionaire Elil Maubro is in crippling debt for a Twitch stream. Sterling Enterprises. He fumbled a literal billionaire heiress. "Shut up!" Bradley screamed at Dominic, his face flushing a violent, splotchy red. "You have no right to look at my private financials. I'll sue you. I'll sue all of you." "You can certainly try," Simone said, taking another step closer. She looked at her husband, the man she had cooked for, budgeted with, and loved with a pure, honest heart, and felt absolutely nothing but a cold, clinical disgust. "But you won't be able to afford a lawyer, because as of 5 minutes ago, my legal team initiated a freeze on all our joint accounts, citing suspected financial fraud and marital dissipation of assets. Not that there was much to freeze." She turned her gaze to Chloe, who was frantically scrolling through her own phone, reading the live chat that was currently tearing her to shreds. "Chloe, is it?" Simone asked politely. "I suggest you check the authenticity of that Cartier watch he gave you. He bought it from a replica dealer in the design district. The receipt is on page 4 of that folder." Chloe's head snapped up, her mouth open in shock. She tore the watch off her wrist, staring at it with utter revulsion before throwing it directly at Bradley's chest. It bounced off him and clattered uselessly onto the floor. "You broke, lying loser!" Chloe shrieked, her manufactured influencer persona completely vanishing. "You told me you were a millionaire. You told me you were flying us to St. Bart's next week. You're paying for this yacht on credit?" "I'm not paying for the yacht at all," Bradley muttered miserably, his shoulders slumping. He looked at Harrison. "Right? Apex paid for it." "Apex is the Sterling family, Bradley," Harrison reminded him cheerfully. "Which means Reginald Sterling paid for it. However, if you recall the morality clause in the contract you signed an hour ago, the one you didn't read because you were too busy drinking my employer's crystal, any public scandal or misrepresentation of your legal status renders you liable for the cost of this entire production." Harrison tapped a few buttons on an iPad. "Yacht rental, camera crew, catering and security. That comes to roughly $340,000. An invoice will be sent to your email." Bradley's knees literally buckled. He dropped onto the edge of a white leather sofa, burying his face in his hands. He was ruined, not just privately, but permanently and publicly destroyed. His followers, the only currency he truly valued, were watching him cry over fake watches and crippling debt. Simone stepped right up to the camera, her expression perfectly composed. "To Bradley's audience," she said clearly. "My husband spent the last 3 years selling you a lie. He sold you a dream of effortless wealth while he secretly drowned us in debt and betrayed his family. There is no shortcut to success. There is only hard work, honesty, and integrity, things Bradley knows nothing about." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a single, neatly folded document. She dropped it into Bradley's lap. "Those are the divorce papers," Simone said, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only for him, though the mics caught every syllable. "You wanted the world to watch you, Bradley. Now they are." She turned her back on him. "Take me home, Daddy," she said to Reginald. The billionaire nodded, offering his daughter his arm. The massive security detail parted like the Red Sea, allowing the Sterling family to exit the grand salon. They walked down the boarding ramp to a waiting fleet of blacked-out SUVs, leaving Bradley Jenkins alone on a rented yacht, weeping on a live stream to an audience that was busy turning his demise into the internet's biggest meme. The fallout was swifter and more brutal than anyone could have predicted. Within 24 hours of the Miami meltdown livestream, Bradley Jenkins was a digital pariah. The clips of Simone confronting him, of Chloe throwing the fake Cartier watch, and of Dominic mercilessly reading his credit card statements went viral across every platform. He was trending globally on X. TikTok creators were doing frame-by-frame body language analyses of his panic, and YouTube commentary channels were churning out hour-long documentaries dissecting his fraudulent lifestyle. His sponsors, mostly low-tier energy drink companies and unregulated crypto apps, dropped him instantly. They issued public statements condemning his actions, desperate to distance themselves from the radioactive blast radius of his ruined brand. Bradley didn't return to Chicago. He couldn't. When he attempted to board a flight at Miami International, his credit card was declined at the ticketing counter. He tried to call Chloe, begging her for a place to crash, but found his number blocked. Chloe had already released a tearful, heavily edited video claiming she was a victim of his narcissistic manipulation, successfully pivoting the scandal into a boost for her own engagement metrics. With nowhere to go, and less than $40 in his checking account, Bradley was forced to pawn his own smartphone just to afford a room at a rundown, windowless motel in Hialeah. Sitting on a lumpy mattress that smelled faintly of mildew and stale smoke, he watched his empire crumble on a cheap, prepaid burner phone. He obsessively refreshed his Instagram page, watching his follower count plummet by the tens of thousands every hour. The comments were a relentless wall of mockery. He was no longer Brad the hustler. He was Broke Brad, the ultimate cautionary tale of fake-it-till-you-make-it culture. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, the Sterling family's legal team descended upon Bradley's remaining assets like a swarm of locusts. Because Simone had documented his infidelity and severe financial mismanagement, the divorce proceedings were a slaughter. The high-powered attorneys proved that Bradley had secretly funneled joint marital funds into his influencer schemes and his affair. Since his liabilities far exceeded anything he owned, the judge granted Simone a heavily favored settlement. She retained full ownership of everything from her premarital life, and Bradley was saddled entirely with the colossal debt he had accrued under his own name. 2 weeks after the live stream, Bradley returned to his leased luxury apartment in downtown Chicago, having hitchhiked and taken grueling bus rides halfway across the country. He found an eviction notice taped to the door. Using his spare key, he walked into the apartment. It was completely empty. Simone had taken her things, the baby's nursery furniture, and everything they had bought together before the madness began. The only items remaining were Bradley's ring lights, a broken tripod, and a stack of unpaid bills piled high on the kitchen island. He walked into what used to be his home office, the room where he had ignored his pregnant wife to yell at a camera, and sank to the floor. The silence in the apartment was deafening. There were no heart emojis, no subscriber alerts, no artificial validation. There was only the crushing reality of his choices. Suddenly there was a heavy knock at the front door. Bradley dragged himself up, hoping it was a delivery or perhaps a mistake. He opened the door to find 2 stern-looking men in cheap suits. "Bradley Jenkins?" the taller one asked, holding a thick manila envelope. "Yeah? Who are you?" Bradley asked, his voice raspy from exhaustion. "Process servers," the man said, thrusting the envelope into Bradley's chest. "You've been served by American Express for defaulting on your platinum card, and by Capital One, and by Discover." Before Bradley could even process the stack of lawsuits, a tow truck pulled into the alleyway directly below his apartment window. He looked down, horrified, as the operator hooked up the white BMW he had been leasing, the car he claimed to have bought in cash, and slowly dragged it away. He had built a castle on a foundation of sand, and the Sterling family had simply summoned the tide. Miles away, in the serene, sunlit solarium of the Sterling estate, Simone sat with her feet propped up, sipping a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. She rubbed her stomach, feeling the strong, rhythmic kicks of her unborn daughter. Dominic walked into the room, holding an iPad. He looked down at his sister, a soft, genuine smile replacing his usual corporate scowl. "The final paper's just cleared," Dominic said, setting the tablet on the table next to her. "The divorce is absolute. The restraining orders are in place. He is legally, financially, and physically barred from ever entering your life or the baby's life again." Simone exhaled, a long, deep breath that seemed to carry the last 3 years of tension out of her body. "Thank you, Dom. Truly." "Don't thank me," Dominic said, leaning against the doorframe. "You're the one who designed the checkmate. I just moved the pieces." Simone looked out the massive bay windows at the manicured gardens of the estate. She didn't feel triumph, nor did she feel sorrow. She simply felt free. She had protected her child from a man who would have exploited them both for a fleeting moment of internet fame. She had reclaimed her narrative. "So," Dominic asked, crossing his arms, "what's the next move? Do you want to go back to the gallery?" Simone smiled, picking up a catalogue for high-end nursery designs. "No, I think I'm going to take some time off. I have an empire to help run, and a daughter to raise, and I'm going to do it quietly." Winter settled over Chicago like a heavy iron blanket, freezing the lake and turning the city streets into tunnels of grey slush. Inside the VIP maternity wing of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, however, the atmosphere was entirely detached from the bitter reality outside. The suite resembled a 5-star hotel rather than a medical facility. Vast windows overlooked the icy expanse of Lake Michigan. The air smelled faintly of fresh white orchids, and a private chef from the Sterling family's payroll quietly prepared nutrient-rich meals in the adjoining kitchenette. Simone Sterling lay against a mountain of plush, imported silk pillows, looking down at the tiny, perfect bundle resting on her chest. Josephine Sterling had been born 3 hours ago, a healthy, beautiful girl with a head of dark curls and her mother's stubborn chin. She was swaddled in a cashmere blanket, utterly oblivious to the vast, multi-billion-dollar empire she had just been born into. Sitting in a leather armchair by the window, Reginald Sterling looked at his newborn granddaughter with a rare, softening expression that few in the corporate world had ever witnessed. Dominic stood near the door, quietly speaking to the head of their personal security detail, ensuring that the entire floor remained locked down. The hospital had signed ironclad non-disclosure agreements. As far as the public was concerned, Simone Sterling was simply an anonymous VIP recovering in absolute privacy. Miles away, in a starkly different reality, Bradley Jenkins was wiping down the laminate counter of a budget car rental kiosk at O'Hare International Airport. He wore a stiff, poorly fitted uniform shirt in a garish shade of yellow. His hands, once meticulously manicured for tight close-ups on his lifestyle vlogs, were now cracked and dry from handling harsh cleaning chemicals and dealing with the freezing airport drafts. His life had been reduced to a punishing cycle of bus rides, minimum wage shifts, and aggressive phone calls from debt collectors. Every paycheck he earned was immediately slashed. The courts had ordered severe garnishments to chip away at the 6-figure mountain of debt he owed to credit card companies and predatory lenders. He didn't have a smartphone anymore. He couldn't afford the data plan, nor did he want to look at the internet. The few times he had logged on to a public library computer to check his old social media handles, he found that his accounts had been permanently banned for violating terms of service regarding financial scams, When people did mention his name, it was only as a punchline. Pulling a Bradley had become urban slang for getting caught faking your wealth. During his 15-minute break, Bradley sat in the sterile, fluorescent-lit employee break room, staring blankly at a discarded copy of a local Chicago society magazine left behind by a flight attendant. He flipped the pages idly until a photograph stopped his heart dead in his chest. It was a candid, high-resolution shot taken from a distance. The caption read, "Sterling Enterprises heiress Simone. Sterling arrives at Northwestern Memorial." The photo showed Simone, heavily pregnant and swathed in a luxurious wool coat, being escorted from a bulletproof SUV into the hospital's private entrance by her brother Dominic. The date on the article was yesterday. Bradley's breath hitched. The baby. His baby. A sudden, desperate delusion seized him. The crushing weight of his current existence vanished, replaced by a frantic, manic spark of hope. That was his child, regardless of the divorce, regardless of the frozen assets, the restraining orders, and the public humiliation. He was the biological father of a billionaire's grandchild. Surely, if he just showed up, if he proved he was willing to be a father, if he begged for forgiveness on his knees, Simone would feel a pang of sympathy. She was a good woman. She wouldn't let the father of her child rot behind a rental desk. He didn't think about the legal barriers. He didn't think about the fact that he had abandoned her for a blonde influencer and a fake lifestyle. He only thought of the golden ticket that was waiting in that hospital suite. Bradley abandoned his post. He didn't even tell his manager. He sprinted out of the terminal, catching the Blue Line train toward downtown, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He rehearsed his speech on the train, perfectly scripting his tears, his apologies, and his promises of redemption. He would tell Simone that losing everything was the wake-up call he needed. He would tell her that he just wanted to hold his daughter. When he arrived at Northwestern Memorial, he rushed through the revolving doors, his cheap uniform damp with nervous sweat. He bypassed the main reception and headed straight for the elevators leading to the VIP maternity ward, a place he only knew about because he had once researched it for a vlog about where the elite give birth, a video he had ultimately faked by filming in a hotel lobby. He stepped out onto the top floor, rehearsing his opening line one last time. He never even made it down the hallway. Stepping out from the shadows of the waiting area, completely blocking the corridor, was Harrison Cole. The corporate fixer wasn't wearing an earpiece this time, nor was he pretending to be a tech executive. He wore a sharply tailored charcoal suit, his hands resting casually in his pockets, his eyes completely devoid of warmth. Flanking Harrison were 4 massive men in dark suits, the same elite Vanguard security team from the yacht. Bradley froze, his cheap sneakers squeaking loudly against the polished linoleum. "Hello, Bradley," Harrison said, his voice a smooth, dangerous purr. "You are violating a court-mandated restraining order. You have exactly 10 seconds to turn around and press the elevator button before I have these gentlemen physically escort you to a police cruiser." "I have a right to be here," Bradley shouted, his voice cracking, echoing pathetically in the quiet, sterile hallway. "Simone is my wife. That's my kid in there. I just want to see my baby." "Simone is your ex-wife." A new voice cut through the air. Dominic Sterling stepped out of a side room, buttoning his suit jacket. He looked at Bradley with the kind of clinical detachment one might reserve for a squashed insect on the pavement. Dominic walked slowly down the hall, stopping a few feet away from the trembling, broken man who had once tried to destroy his sister's dignity for Instagram likes. "You do not have a child, Bradley," Dominic said, his tone chillingly precise. "You forfeited any right to that title the moment you chose a rented yacht and a mistress over your family. You are nothing more than a biological footnote in Josephine's life." "Josephine," Bradley whispered, tears welling in his eyes. He dropped to his knees, his pride entirely stripped away. The cold floor seeped through his thin uniform pants. "Please, Dominic, I'm begging you. I have nothing. I lost everything. Just let me see her. Just for 5 minutes. I can change. I can be a father to her." Dominic looked down at the weeping man. There was no pity in the billionaire's eyes. He had spent his life dealing with ruthless corporate raiders. He knew how to recognize a parasite grasping for a host. "You didn't come here because you love that little girl," Dominic said quietly, leaning down slightly so only Bradley could hear him. "You came here because you are drowning, and you think she is a life raft made of gold. You think a connection to this family is your way out of the pathetic, miserable hole you dug for yourself." Bradley sobbed, covering his face with his calloused hands. "No, I just want my family." "Your family is a memory," Dominic stated, straightening up. "And your future is paying off the debts of a life you never actually lived. You are an illusion, Bradley, and the Sterling family does not deal in illusions." Dominic nodded at Harrison. Before Bradley could scream, the security guards descended. They hoisted him off the floor with terrifying ease, practically carrying him back into the elevator. He thrashed and wept, begging for Simone, but the heavy steel doors slid shut, sealing him away from the empire he had thrown away. He was dragged out through the loading dock, tossed onto the icy pavement, and left staring at the towering, impenetrable walls of the hospital. Back in the warm, sunlit suite, Simone heard none of the commotion. The soundproofing in the VIP wing was flawless. She gently rocked Josephine in her arms, humming a soft, low melody. Reginald sat nearby, reading a financial report on a tablet, occasionally looking up to smile at his daughter and granddaughter. The air in the room was peaceful, anchored by centuries of quiet power and unconditional loyalty. Dominic slipped back into the room, his expression calm and relaxed. He poured himself a cup of coffee from the silver carafe on the table and sat on the edge of the sofa. "Everything quiet outside?" Simone asked softly, not looking up from Josephine's sleeping face. "Completely quiet," Dominic replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "Just the wind. Nothing to worry about." Simone smiled, kissing the top of her daughter's head. She knew what Dominic meant. The ghost of her past had tried to haunt them one last time, and it had been exorcised at the door. Bradley Jenkins belonged to the digital wasteland he had built for himself, a prisoner of his own vanity. Simone looked out the window at the sprawling, icy skyline of Chicago. She was Simone Sterling, the heiress to an empire, a mother to a beautiful daughter, and a woman who had walked through the fire of betrayal and emerged forged in steel. She pulled the cashmere blanket tighter around Josephine, her heart full, her mind clear, and her future entirely her own. Ultimately, the tragedy of Bradley Jenkins was not that he lost a fortune he never truly possessed, but that he sacrificed genuine, unconditional love at the altar of public validation. He traded a loyal wife and the promise of a beautiful family for fleeting internet fame, cheap applause, and a manufactured reality that shattered the moment it was tested. In his desperate pursuit to appear wealthy to absolute strangers, he threw away the very key to a literal empire. Simone Sterling, conversely, proved that true power does not need to broadcast its existence. By stripping away the noise, she reclaimed her life, protected her daughter, and secured her legacy. The live stream that Bradley thought would be his coronation became his permanent digital tomb, a final, ruthless reminder that those who live entirely for the applause of the crowd will inevitably die in absolute silence.